Right. All right. Yeah. Let's get started as we some of us have to leave early, and so we want to try to get through our agenda, acknowledging the importance of every single item that's in the agenda. So we see that. So welcome, and just want to say thank you for attending this planning session next last week. I think it was a really great conversation. I hope you felt the same, and I think we walked out, even though we may not have gotten to every part of the agenda. I think we had a very robust and important conversation to help set the direction for EDC going forward. I want to thank Jim and the team for their eagerness and willingness to listen to what all of us thinking about and so any comments or discussion? It was good. It was good. Very enjoyable. Yeah. So we'll, if you don't mind, just so that we make sure we maintain our quorum, and some of us have to be early, including myself. We'll do the reports of the committees, then we'll move right into the resolutions, and then we can come back and report out and at the dog too. Yes. So we'll start with the reports from the committees, so audit and finance.
Thanks. We did have a meeting on November 12th, and we reviewed the financials, which we put forward here in the main meeting. We also reviewed a proposal for the budget. It was there were some things that we did ask to be changed to it, and the motion did pass for moving it again to the board meeting. And we did review a number of resolutions. They were presented to us for review, and we have moved forward with those that we were able to. There was a required resolution, which again, I believe they're going to show up here. So it was all the votes were unanimous, and the meeting ended well. That's my report.
Any questions for Kathy? I'm glad it ended well. We talked about money, all to end well.
I'll just add a little bit of context. The resolutions are standard, especially for those new board members that we have put this time of year for the calendar year, usually based on application. So particularly what we do, every budget based on that application. Every party I got the first to come here. Well, we don't track that internally, but we will not post an update to what we posted.
So if people were to look online, I just want to make the point that you're going to see on the ABO website that something different.
Well, other thing I just want to point out to you. The auditor. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, he's here to do a follow-up on that. He's here to be off. For about 10 minutes. So if you're here, always if you see a person that is related. Okay.
I think we'll do the budget at the next meeting.
Obviously, getting these things ratified.
We talked about a change in. South increase.
Jim, I apologize. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but the audio is cut out on the meeting.
Well.
We'll take up the new business, a couple of those resolutions, and allowing time that, the board wishes to talk about the establishment of the executive. Just if anyone has any thoughts or input. So, with that, like, if you don't mind, let's move to the resolution section. I don't think there's anything in here that we didn't just discuss as part of the committee work. But before we take up with those resolutions, just to kind of piggyback on Sue's comment around the executive committee, the resolution that's in your packet, in the materials section, thank you. What we're proposing to the full board is that the chair and vice chair would have a seated role on the executive committee, and then one other board member that this board would like to nominate and approve. And again, just to have not atypical of any board, but to have that executive committee kind of also be the sounding board for Jim when he's confronted with various opportunities and challenges in his work, but also to address any personnel conversations that need to occur. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or excuse me, comments on establishing that committee that would bring the 4 to 3 standing.
I agree. It's a good idea to have that.
Well, this essentially codifies what is happening formally now. So when something that is outside of the normal board rhythm occurs, like for instance, when we have an issue with one of our major partners, I contact the chair of the board, usually the chair of the audit finance committee, which is also our vice chair, and at least let them know about that, and then we kind of problem solve together. And so this is essentially just taking what we're doing now and turning it into a real process that's acknowledged. I think there is value in having one though, because I think that that status, for instance, if somebody from our executive committee were to come to the county when we're making a presentation or would be part of our public persona when we go out, I think that that actually carries some gravitas as opposed to that. So we're really, really supportive of this. I hope we can make this happen.
Just a procedural question as I'm about this, so if today the board approves the resolution to establish the committee. We didn't put in an item in here about nominating a member.
You put it in the resolution.
Yeah,
Attached here.
right, but, my question would be, we solicit nominations now, we pass the resolution first. And then even in December, we could come back, and have that conversation about nominating a member to join the executive committee.
My suggestion is that the governance committee function that same way as they do for work. Or they're the conduit to the full board, whatever.
So at our December meeting, governance, we discuss bringing forward a candidate at December.
Just remind me, everyone serve on one committee. So everyone.
No, there's no limitation.
Okay, so. everything will-
More the merrier. Yeah, you want to serve on every committee. Okay. Okay, we can do that. Okay, good, thank you. Any other questions on any other resolutions that are before us? Otherwise, we could take them as one.
I'm also happy we could, if you want, it's a little awkward with me sitting here. If you want a discussion, I'm happy to step out.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
I will do that.
Close your ears.
I'll go to the hallway.
Don't go far.
I'll leave my stuff.
And as this body knows, we've been eager to reengage Arrow back on the board, so we're thrilled as a governance committee, I think, and in general, that Paul is interested in wanting to join us. He's got many years of commercial lending experience and was one of the largest employers in our community. So is there any other concern?
So he's my banker, is that a problem? Yeah, but he's fabulous.
I don't believe so, yeah.
There are bankers.
There are,
Yeah, you know, it's wonderful to have a banker on board, it's
Yeah,
very
it is.
necessary in the scheme of economic development.
For those of you who don't know, that Gonzales National was fundamental in establishing the EDC was before Arrow at the time. Tom Way in particular, and so having them continue to be part of us, I think is both a tie to the past, but also helps, I think, the community at large feel like the core mission is still in place, even as we take on lots of other things.
So, Emily, could you tell all that? Hear the resounding support of his recommendation. Yeah.
Did I pack up?
Lucky you still have. Just have a clarity, you're just-
Right at the top. U-turn.
All right, so we'll take the first two, approval of the October 2024 financials and also approval of the October board minutes. I'll take a motion. Those two.
So.
Second. Ms. Kathy. Any questions, discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? We'll do each of these resolutions individually, so approval of the set contributions.
So.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Any questions, discussion? All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained. Next, approval of the 2025 health center and life contributions.
Can I just make one clarification? In the past, I think I said that they went up 50%. I misspoke, they went up 17%, but we budgeted at 20%, so we're still in a good place.
So, thanks, Sue. Second. Thank you, Jim. Questions, discussion, all in favor, aye. Opposed, abstained. Approval of the 2025 police salary increase has been our standard increase of 3%. Thank you, Sue. I'll second. Thank you, Melanie. Questions, discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. Approval of the 2025 EDC holiday schedule, which was not any different than last year, so it's staying the same. Motion. Oh, come on, right. So you think this to show the second, thank you, Melanie. Any questions, discussion, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. Motion to approve the establishment of the EDC executive.
So
Thank you, Jim. Second. Thank you, Melanie. Discussion. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, thank you. And finally, the moment we've been waiting, for, a motion to approve the appointment of Paul Worston to the EDC.
So moved.
Yeah, second, Jim. Any discussion?
Board members supposed to bring breakfast.
Got to give him that memo. Well, his official first board member, that would be, yeah. We had a robust discussion and we're all very excited.
So thanks. I'm happy to be here.
All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, abstained.
But now I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So we will move on to the president's staff report.
everybody, we have, later this morning, we meet with the county in their economic development committee. It's sort of an end of year way. Typically, whenever the budget is either in process or just been finalized, we attempt to try to put a goal on the year. So some of the material you see here is some of the same material we're going to share with them. Some of it you may have seen before, that's fine. But as we always do, we just show you the continued upward trend of the activity that we're involved in. In order for something to register on this first chart, this has to be not just somebody who makes a phone call, but an active engagement where we're actively doing some level of work. We track all of these, so at any point, if you want more details about it, we can provide it. You continue to see that I think every category, we're kind of, it's like a third of new things helping businesses that already exist, and then what we would consider to be kind of greenfield interest. Yes.
Robert, do you have?
So we'll talk specifically about some of these as we go through it, but the next pie chart gives you some breakdown of where those are. We look at it in terms of the sector, we look at it in terms of what size of the business are we supporting, we look at it in terms of whether or not this is a net new thing or somebody who's already here. We look at it in terms of where it would go. For those of you that are new, it is not atypical for the majority of the work to be in Glens Falls and Queensbury. But the reason that we track this is that we want to make sure that there is at least as much work as we can draw in the rest of the county and to give visibility to not only you, but the county to the fact that we work across the entire place. Now, ironically, little tiny pieces can sometimes be big in terms of the work we do. I've probably spent 20 hours since we last got together in North Creek. And so while it looks like a little tiny sliver, there's a big chunk of work there, and there's a big opportunity, I think, for Warren County. We're going to talk.
So Jim, I think it's not legal. Is that the yellow?
Yeah. So some of those specific things are on that next chart. I wanted to bring them to your attention just so that you can be aware and hopefully advocate for some of this in your own personal networks. We have been working for the last year in an informal way with large legacy organizations, primarily manufacturers, but they're not all manufacturers. It's anybody who uses a lot of power and employs a lot of people. And the reason that we're doing this is because there are many things about the costs in New York that are probably not within our scope to be able to influence. But in the past, there has been programs at the state level to create certain incentives around energy that would be beneficial to large-scale energy users. And I'm particularly focused on organizations like Finch, but it's not exclusive to Finch. But we need to give our legacy manufacturers every opportunity that they can have to remain competitive for as long as they can. And I will tell you that this work, even though it has not completed, was part of the discussion that we had with Andrew all the way up to their CEO in terms of the fact that we were engaged in it and they would see that there was a possibility of it was part of the faith building that we did over the last year to try to bring some of that work back. we're meeting with our legislators in between now and the end of the year to try to formalize an approach. Eventually, this is gonna have to go to the governor's office, and we're gonna need advocacy and support at that time. So I don't wanna spring it on you then. Sometime in the next year, we will be coming to the second floor, looking for some kind of carve out. If we can, we will tie it to hydro, because we have a unique advantage in that we produce a disproportionate amount of small hydro, which is really important to the state and their climate goals. And ironically, with these large scale energy users, they go away. That base load that those small hydro providers are providing goes away, and then they have to push their power into a competitive grid in a way that they are not subsidized to do. They don't have the same subsidies as wind and solar. And so we will lose some of those small scale hydro producers, and everybody loses. The state loses clean energy. We lose, business and infrastructure that we have here, and those large scale power users obviously are losers. That to me, 3 losers doesn't seem like a good game. But we have to educate people about not only what would happen if we did nothing, but what are our options to go forward. The same way, Mike, you had asked us to bring National Grid back to talk about, and that's down at the bottom, to talk about their proposed rate increases. They've been alerting us to this for several years. This is not new, but I think it's starting to gather people's attention because it's staring us in the face. National Grid, look, I'm not an apologist for them, but they got to work with what it is they've been told to do. They've got to go essentially rebuild the grid. Somebody's going to have to pay for that, and that's the ratepayers. Now, the only way to influence this is politically to engage the state about whether or not they would continue to hold fast to the timelines and methods that they've laid out in their climate action plan. I think all they would have to do is either relieve some of those timelines or expand some of the ways that it could be accommodated, and those prices and costs would change dramatically, but we need to educate people about it so that they can advocate effectively. So National Grid is preparing to make that kind of presentation here. One of the things I would ask us to do as a group is to keep this from becoming something they regret doing. In order for us to have a good conversation, we need not to vilify them. They're here to present the information. They're here to help us understand it so we can go advocate for whatever change we think is appropriate. But it's very important to understand that National Grid did not dream up the things that they're being asked to perform to. And they are regulated pretty highly in the state of New York. So I don't think there's value in us coming after them. I think there is value in encouraging them to engage in the dialogue here and making that as productive as possible. So when that presentation comes at the county, I'm going to ask some of you to go, just so that we can help regulate the temperature of the room, because there will be people who show up who are just looking to be mad. And we need to be the voice of business, I think, that says we want to have a productive conversation here and focus on what's doable, what we recommend, what are some of the things we need to know. Some of the other things we've already talked about, we continue to work with the city on Tech Meadows and Coop Coffee's application. And following that will probably be some work with Queensberry to continue to update whatever is the appropriate zoning and land use associated with that parcel. Those are 2 separate processes. We have engaged an organization to use some of the ARPA funds that we got for housing support to look at places where if we were to expand the definitions or zoning, we might be able to include more areas for housing development, one of which is Tech Meadows. So in that work, you may see Tech Meadows being bandied about. No decisions been made. We're simply asking for the work to be done to say what would it take in order to make some or all of that available to housing. EDC has been trying to support West Mountain and their development work through the town of Queensberry for more than 2 years. They've been involved in the planning process there. Like everything here, it's long and arduous. I did want you to know though, because we are taking a more visible role. There's no way to not be for this. This is not only housing that would be resort style housing, there's a workforce component. There's a high level of employment, both long-term and in the construction of the project. And it's really the only way that this resort is going to stay alive in the face of climate change. So if we would like that cornerstone of Queensberry and Warren County to remain, we have to try to help facilitate a much more sustainable approach for how that property is used. I believe this is done very reasonably. We've been deeply engaged in the planning process and we will continue to advocate for that. Yes,
Hasn't West Mountain over the years, even under prior ownership, proposed different kinds of developments and housing and so on? So is this different or is this just?
well, it's more ambitious than anything before, which is primarily, very high-end housing at the top of the ridge is what was being proposed before. This is a multi-tiered, housing development that has apartments, townhomes, condominiums, and single-family homes. It has, resort amenities, but it also has workforce housing. They're even considering whether or not they could apply for some of the affordable housing, grants that are available. The other thing is that it's really ironic that this is the only housing development I've seen in Queensbury where the neighbors are not worked up about this. That they've done a very good job of engaging with the community around them. They've had a number of open houses and there really is not significant resistance from the neighborhood. This has more to do with just, you know, kind of seeker stuff and wetland stuff and, you know, timelines like that. But we're gonna continue to try to shepherd them through the process. On the broadband side, John said something at the strategic planning session that I need to make sure that we clarify here. We continue to engage in broadband and will, not just because the county asked us to, but because there is a competitive economic case to be made. Right now, we're in a place where there's a single provider for the vast majority of Warren County. That's not a great position to be for businesses or individuals. We will continue to advocate for the build out of that infrastructure and a competitive landscape, because that's going to be important to us to have modern fiber in as many places as possible and choice for our customers, whether some of which are business and some of which are residential. But many of those residential customers are business customers too, as we talked about before. There are enterprises showing up in people's third bedrooms. That's a big part of the economy's growth going forward. Having fiber go to more parts of the county and not just a cable that was there in 1975 is a really important part of our infrastructure plan. And we're not going to back away from continuing to advocate for it. And it has advantages to every single resident of Warren County. The first ones that will see it are in Glens Falls and Queensbury because that's where the density is, that's where the business case is. But once that infrastructure is in, it allows us to try to advocate for that to extend into the rest of the county. But we're working heavily right now with primarily with the city, but also with the carriers to try to create as much of that as we can. And even if the county were to say, hey, thanks for helping us get off the number we were at before COVID, we would continue this work. Maybe not at the same intensity, but we have to. North Creek, I mentioned, we helped drive that sewer. It took 30 years to get, and 5 elections to finally get a sewer district formed in North Creek. That sewer is fundamental to Orta's $25 million investment in the ski bowl project. That ski bowl project and the year-round traffic that it will help sustain is key to getting further development of the hospitality industry in North Creek and linkage between our existing hospitality community in places like Lake George and North Creek, both of which are booms to our tourism sector, which is 1/3 of our economy. So you will see us talking very openly about the fact that we want to create a corridor that CDTA would eventually move people from Lake George to North Creek. We want to help advance the infrastructure such that a hotel or a resort could be developed. And so you will see us continue to work in that way. And these are all things we're going to talk to the county. The next page really is just a summarization of what we talked about at the strategic planning session. So I don't think it's new, but we did want you to see that we're working across all of the input that you gave us in the areas that we're looking to essentially condense our 25-page strategic plan into something that is more understandable. There are organizational goals, there are economic development goals, and there are ways that we do it in terms of how we engage. And most of what is contained as actions in that plan find themselves in these 3 areas. We talk about engagement all the time, and these just give you some examples of the type of engagements and the scale of engagements. To us, if we go speak somewhere, if we go convene a group somewhere, if we represent, like the EDC was on the DRI committee with Kathy and others in Lake George, those are examples of our kind of engagement that we're seeing trends.
Jim, the access there, the 32 hours, those are like the number of engagements. Is that-
Typically, yes. Typically in a month, we are out doing something 30 times. That's really what we're trying to tell you. I think this is also important because I think oftentimes people are trying to figure out, if I haven't seen them, are they? And we have to ask ourselves that question, but I'm pretty convinced, a steady state, the lowest I've ever seen is high 20s. There are sometimes when it's 40 or 50 in an intense month. It really actually taxes the ability of a small team like ours to keep up that. I did also want to highlight to you some upcoming events. We're going to see the Economic Growth Committee today. You'll see there's a flyer for our holiday gathering on the 12th. If we know that there are other events on that day, we kind of strategically positioned it on that day to be the first place that somebody might go. It's 4 to 6, it will be here. We're continuing to try to create some momentum for Big Brothers and Big Sisters. As somebody who's been involved with the organization, I can tell you that what they desperately need are things for older kids. And if you don't know what to get for an older kid, a gift card is better than a toy for an 8-year-old. They get tons of little kid toys, and most of their client base are not little. So we could really benefit by staying focused on what they're telling us they need and helping our business partners fill this void that they have. We also are having an event in conjunction with Startup EDC at SUNY Adirondack that's scheduled now for January 14th. This is not only the culmination of Startup EDC, where we're going to award those that went through the program in the fall their completion certificates, but Bob Bullock, who leads that program from SUNY EDC, and the EDC are working to essentially turn it into a large collaborative event around the entrepreneurial culture here. And we're looking to do this multiple times a year where we can use the momentum of Startup EDC to help create that event, but that's not the focus of the event. Now, Melanie, we talked a little bit about taking some of the things we were planning to do with either new residents or returnees or some of the community that we're trying to engage. This is the first place I'd like to steer them. It's not the only place it is. But they will find more of each other in a place like that. The first time we did this, I think they had nearly 100 people. Bob does a really nice job of putting a program together, so we're looking forward to this being a very impactful event.
Jim, maybe at the next meeting, could you start to kind of plot out your plan for, one of the big discussions we had at the strategic planning session was getting these member meetings together, and you could give us a kind of a sense of a calendar, or
We actually started that work this week in terms of identifying them and starting to reach out to them. Our goal is to and Paul, you'll inherit the conversation that I had with both Dave and Mark. But anybody who is either at a board level or a large scale investor in the EDC, we're looking to have a direct meeting with them where we can not only share some condensed version of our strategy, but also solicit from them the things that they see or need. So that's the top 2 tiers of membership, and we've constructed that engagement process right now. So we'll be executing that between now and the next meeting. And if we're having trouble getting to any of those people, we will look for some of your support to make sure that people understand what we're trying to do. And this is not like a shakedown. This is us trying to actually hear from them. And we will also try to do events that are focused at community groups. Schools are very interested in this conversation. So that will be one of the first communities we go to. Don't care whether we talk to administration or we talk to PTAs or we talk to faculty, anybody who's trying to figure out what we're doing to try to continue to attract people and how that might affect them and their work in the school. I think they're interesting partners in some of the work we do, not traditional ones, but very interesting.
and I think we might have also talked about in the question, maybe others remember, but we also talked about potentially grouping people by industry. When we talked about manufacturers and hospitality or experience economy, and trying to get a sense from them what we can do to help them. So there's through membership, but maybe also by industry.
Well, that leads us to the next thing, which is I just want to give you an update. I think it was earlier this week, we were already at $25,000 received, which is 25% of our goal, and we haven't got to Thanksgiving. As far as I can see, this is the most organized and planned we've ever been around membership. That's really because of the team. Tricia's very dogged about it, but everybody participates in it in one way or another. Beyond reaching out to those that have been traditional members and are in our traditional catchment area, we've identified a much wider swath of potential members. if any of you attended the power breakfast that the Albany Business Journal put on, they see the same thing that we see. Which is that this is a developable corridor that the businesses in the capital district have an interest in having relationship and being ready to support. Sometimes it's housing, sometimes it's just business expansion, but if you just look at the amount of money that's gonna come into the capital district, it's going to push out in all directions. And not everybody that works at the chip fab is going to stop at Saratoga. In fact, something like 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 11 employees there now live north of Saratoga. So as there's more, that's both a business opportunity and obviously a population opportunity for us. But the business base of Albany is a target area for us. And many of them showed up just by having an event here. So anybody who showed up at that room, we're going to engage. And then we've created a list that's much more robust than that, but we would welcome, we'll share that list and
Everything's in your.
yeah, and anybody that you don't see there that you think we should engage, we'd be happy to do it. Our goal here, and this has been controversial before, but Warren County's financial future is not based only on Warren County businesses or Warren County dollars. Outside businesses and outside dollars drive us, and they always have. And we need to be present, not so much to represent them, but to receive them. And to make sure that people know how to connect with this place. It's not just builders, but we will go to builders. It's not just bankers, but we will go to bankers. It's not just people in the legal profession. It's everybody who does everything. But so far, I mean, I think if I were to go back and say, well, where were we at? When did we get $25,000 last year? I think it might have been somewhere around April or May. So we are well ahead of our target. And this is really also important for diversifying our funding. If we want to reduce kind of the impacts we get from the political process, but we need to build a stronger base of private donors. A lot of social work, which is connected to this membership, and Emily's been driving this. It's hard to get a sense of, what is the perspective of this, but I just tell you that it wasn't high before Emily got here. We would not have measured things in hundreds or thousands. What we're doing is driving more and more content that is interesting to people, that tells them things they didn't know and allows them to engage not only with us, but with others. I think the strategy is working. Wanted to give you a sense of that. The only other thing that I would share here is, we have asked that our attorneys provide us with some more specific operative language around the contract with Weaver. We had talked about updating the scope and changing the language from what was presented to us by the town. The town approved their budget 2 weeks ago, and in it for this year had the full funding that they have traditionally provided to the EDC. So I believe that we are operating really in terms, remember that they had presented to us a 3-year contract rather than a 1-year contract. And I think the key here for us is figuring out how to enter into that with the language we believe is the right thing for us to counter with. I would suggest that we push that into the early part of next year. I don't think there's a sense that we need to drive that to closure in the month of December. And so we'll bring the options to you in the next meeting cycle, and then collectively we can decide what would be the approach to come to the town maybe after the beginning of the year. We continue to carry those as receivables from the town. So we have, we're halfway through their budget year and we're $50,000 in arrears in terms of the payments. But quite honestly, from our municipal partners, this is business as usual. The county, who we have a supportive contract with, oftentimes is more than 90 days behind in their payment structure. I think it will be material that we get it done in the second half of next year. That's it.
I have a quick question on the gift certificate, gift cards. Is there a max, like $50, 25?
25 and 50 are the sweet spots.
Okay.
The issue is that they're trying to make sure that kids get
Uh-huh.
something that's equitable. And I think they have some kind of age thing, but it changes based on really what the pool of what they have.
We also said for older kids, older products.
Yeah. Braille height and stuff.
Probably the stuff I would buy. Would not be what they want.
You're pretty, yeah.
Well, I mean, ask my kids. Just a couple things, one, those of you who may not know, Warren County's 2040 plan. Is in process, there was a public meeting, Monday. Some of us were at, I was pleased to see some mention of EDC as, some of the initiatives, I thought that was positive. But if you haven't been able to attend a public meeting, you can go on their website and still look at the different goals, their vision statement, and be able to provide feedback. I think it's important that, y'all try to do it as you can. And then I'm thinking with membership, maybe we could start tracking year to year, because we've done that before, just to kind of see where we're at. Is it like, is it apples to oranges or
I
something?
started it last year
Uh-huh.
and I created a new database to track this. And the records prior to that, sorry, Jim, are a little.
A little sketchy.
I can give you like an Excel file. But it's not a scale.
I'm just wondering, like, you know, what benchmarks we want to kind of look at and see if we're behind, then, you know, it just, but if you're tracking that internally somehow, it's just.
Well, I can get something like.
Yeah, I can tell you who paid it, what year.
This year and last year were way ahead of.
Well, so
Prior
Yeah,
years.
yeah, so I think if we just looked at last year to this year, not worry about.
from a timing standpoint, we are ahead. The majority of these are not the larger contributors to the organization. And I don't believe that we are in jeopardy of losing any of those from my ongoing contact with people. So I believe that we're probably at a point where 75% of the goal is easily seen. So I think now it's really about how do we get from that to not only our target but beyond. And I think that's engaging people who either dropped off before, we haven't any contact with in the past year, or net.
So just one comment, Jim, about the Queensberry discussion. Next year is an election year for everyone in the board. So I think the earlier in the year, you can start having these discussions, the better. Because in the fall, it'll become something that would be contentious, potentially.
Well, and I saw in today's paper, Scott was brought to the board formally this week, Scott Gershon. It still looks like there's a recount underway. They've seated him on the board. So Scott, and we have engaged as we do all candidates. And at this point, it's appropriate, I think, for us to engage all of the board members in this process ahead of whatever we do next. And that's part of this time that I'm trying to create. Scott was very supportive in his campaign of both economic development and some of the things that we work on. I think that there is support for the concept of what we do.
If he won by 7 votes, he's gonna be anxious next year also.
So,
How can there be a recount going underway if he's been?
I have no idea why they did that. They must be
Yeah,
pretty close and pretty much solid,
but it was unanimous amongst the board, including John. So,
Who's doing the recount? The county?
yeah.
Board of Elections, yeah. So they probably have done a recount already. But they're gonna, someone else will challenge it again and they'll have to go through it one more time, but I think the time is just decided that. It's a done deal.
One last thing that I didn't put on the agenda, but okay, you got to remind me, the DRI for Lake George, approved their slate of projects and what they're done last night. That is going to be after the Florida and engagement up at the ski board, the next biggest investment of infrastructure and public money in Warren County. And there is housing components to it. There's 3 of those projects that have been advanced to the state that would help renovate buildings to support housing of seasonal workers, roughly 60 or 70 slots. Less ambitious than I was hoping for, but more than 0. There is a significant business and building that's going to be invested in, or at least is proposed to be invested in on the main thoroughfare in Lake George on Cannon Street. And then there are a whole slate of public infrastructure projects that will continue to enhance that as the gateway for people who experience us from the outside. That process was a year. And it went better than it did in Glens Falls in terms of being, I think, fully. All the issues were worked out, the public was deeply engaged in it from the beginning, and it led to a productive outcome that I think is executable. We will have a role as we go forward, and we submitted $12 million worth of projects for just slightly under $10 million worth of funding, which means that there is some down select process at the state. And then, once that money is awarded sometime next year, we will continue to support Lake George and their efforts to try to get that work done. I don't know what that will mean, but that was one of the more successful things I've been involved with the state. Long and hard with them.
Well, it's 2 years actually, so we had to apply for it as well, but I think the key was Dan. And he kept going, he was kind of one person for all of us.
So this is part of the hidden work that people don't see. We met with Dan sometimes weekly during the pandemic, and then coming out of the pandemic, at least monthly.
Dan Baruch, he's our planning
He's the planner.
for the village and the
For the
town.
village and the town. And that never appears in any of this work, but we helped him build the plan to apply. We helped him put the whole approach to engage the business community and the community at large together, and then we participated with him through the process. And the town officials are the ones that are standing in front. That's how this is supposed to work. We are not supposed to stand in front, but we are supposed to help the people who are standing in front. I think it was one of our better chapters.
I will tell everybody, since I was on the committee as well, that Jim's input really helped us to understand how it went in Glens Falls, where the pitfalls were. And the group that the state representatives were actually really good as well, but your input was really invaluable to us. I was the co-chair with the mayor and the supervisor. And we needed that. We needed that because none of us had been through this process before. So thanks to the board letting him do all that. It's helpful.
Everything I have. I think there had been some intention to discuss anything that people wanted to out of the strategic planning session, either in terms of questions or things that we didn't get to. I don't know whether you have anything on your mind. We're building a set of ways that we will report that's more aligned with the kind of direction we took out of that. So you'll see us more with something, this organizational strategy and engagement approach. And then trying to develop measures. This meeting we have with the county will also inform that today. But we'd like to propose something coming into the new year that would kind of reshape the way we present information, so it's more aligned with that and also more clear to our members and stakeholders with what is going on and how it affects them.
So one of my thoughts is that we had a very good discussion. It was going back and forth with our session, but I still feel as though there's probably more that we should do. And it's almost something like I'd like to see us do it in another next quarter or something like that. To have another one of those sessions, to have the board really just kind of free flow. Instead of this meeting, where the agenda is set, we can't really talk about whatever might be on our minds. So just a suggestion, Jim, I don't know if you.
I feel very productive.
Well, one thing that I've talked to Chris about is sending the information that we present to you in advance of the meeting with some kind of summary that I would give to you, and then taking that time and creating that more of the robust conversation we've had there, more of the problem solving. Now, I'm going to be frank about why this didn't happen before. These are public meetings, and everybody didn't necessarily want to have that kind of, problem solving in a public forum. But I think we're entering into an era where that's just how it works. And I'm comfortable with it if you're comfortable with it. We would create room in the existing structure by giving you the information and engaging with you one-on-one with the questions you have and things like this. And letting the majority of the time be you talking to each other and then to us about how we can do whatever needs to be done. Or what we need to do that we're not doing. I don't know. I think that was part of the conversation you don't have. Unfortunately, she laughed, but I don't know whether that's the way you guys wanted to go. But we would definitely accommodate it if it was.
We have a forum though, I think it needs to remain a public meeting, that's right.
It will be a public.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you just have to decide how comfortable you are having a robust conversation, like this whole thing with Greensbury. I mean, it's playing out on the paper. I don't know that there's necessarily any value in us not being able to talk openly about it. But this meeting right now is being recorded.
There's some things with the, they could be moved into executive session.
That's right.
Contracts specifically.
Contracts,
Is
anything
definitely
legal,
one of the
anything,
things.
anything that has names or, you know, proprietary numbers to it.
And strategy might be also included if it has some type of business type relationship that's saying that these are the options for us moving forward. We could have those discussions, I believe, in executive session, we come out in executive session. And kind of maybe explain what our results are. But I think we can keep some of this to the board itself. Why don't you check with Kara or whoever, to see if we can pull this off.
So I'm hearing you say that another meeting in the near future to complete that which we did not complete, or to continue the conversation. If it's in line, Jim, with what you're saying, like January. Then is there any other new business? I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank one of our wonderful investors, for being here and attending. And if there's no further business, Jim. Motion to adjourn. Yeah. This is something I'm looking. All in favor? Aye. Thank
You
you.
know, the county also does something called early report to allow the public to speak before we get into our business or after we get into business with Robert here. I was just thinking about it, you know, maybe it might be wise. We have people coming from the community. In the sense that if we talk to you in the beginning or at the end, a couple of minutes,
That'd be a good idea.
I'm sure Robert would have something to say.
I think we should think about what policy we want to put in place proactively before we did that.
Yeah.
To make sure that it is streamlined and doesn't become its own. You know, its own thing, but I think there's plenty of precedent for how to do that, we can figure out.
I think there would be some values in that.
Yeah.
Getting the public coming in here and giving us their 2 cents about what's happening.
Is there any 2 cents you would like to give us, Mr. Niemer?
Not today, but in the future, I will keep it short, so you don't have to worry about me, going over. Thank you, Michael.
What the timer, you know, timer goes out, 30 seconds.
We're grateful for you not only being here today, Robert, but all the myriad of things that you do. I see you everywhere. Make this community way better.
Try.
You do. Thank you.
Thank you.